Hey everyone, I'm Lisa Jordan, and welcome to Menopausitive.
I got a good feeling.
Where we take a refreshingly positive approach to navigating menopause. If you're looking for practical tips, expert advice, and honest conversations, think of this as your personal pick and mix for how to optimize your body. Although we can't prevent menopause, we can redefine it. And that journey starts now. Quick favor before we start. If you're enjoying these conversations, please hit follow and rate the show. It helps more women find us, and it means I can keep bringing you brilliant guests and empowering conversations. Did you know that women age faster during menopause? On average, we're winning at the longevity game. Women outlive men by more than 5 years. But according to the World Economic Forum and McKinsey Health Institute, we also spend 25% more years in poor health. Now, that gap exists for a few reasons: scientific bias, gender barriers to care. We're also just starting to understand the role hormones play, not just for reproduction, but for our health span. I was reading a recent article in Women's Health magazine, and Jennifer Garrison, she is the co-director of the Center for Healthy Aging in Women. She says that our ovaries, they're like the source of estrogen and progesterone creation in our bodies. They're like these little endocrine Wi-Fi. They're in constant communication with nearly every tissue in our body. And when they're not working properly, whether you're 14 or 45, the ripple effects can increase our risk of disease. Let me give you an example. So, if you hit menopause before the age of 45, that raises your risk of cardiovascular disease. If you have your ovaries removed before the age of 50, without any hormone replacement therapy, you face higher mortality rates. No wonder hormone therapy is now a central part of the longevity conversation. Personally, it's one of the reasons I decided to try it. Not so much for menopause symptoms, but to protect my long-term health. Science now recognizes that menopause has a powerful influence on how we age and how well we live later in life. That's why I am so passionate about educating and empowering women like you on how to transform their menopause experience. In fact, this shared belief, it's what created an instant bond between me and our next guest. When I tracked her down at the Health Optimization Summit and I asked her if she would be on the show, there was an immediate yes. And here we are today. So, today, I'm thrilled to welcome longevity trailblazer Nikolina Lauc, who is here to explain how understanding our personal biology can revolutionize how we approach menopause, disease prevention, and aging itself. She is the CEO and co-founder of GlycanAge, a company pioneering blood biomarkers to determine your biological age and predict age-related disease in order to help you create personalized interventions that will help you live longer and healthier. She is also a serial entrepreneur. She is the co-inventor in some women's health diagnostics. She's the co-founder of Women for Longevity. I don't know how she does it all because she is much younger than me. Nikolina, welcome to Menopausitive.
Thank you for having me.
Women are winning at the longevity game versus men, but we are spending more years in poor health. What is going on?
Well, actually, I think we have a solution for that. We just don't apply it in practice. So yes, at the moment, we spend 25% longer with disease burden, but also we don't make use of the therapies that we know actually reduces all-cause mortality and majority of that disease burden. So I think the statistic sounds grim, but it's potentially just coming down to not using the tools we already have.
And what tools are you talking about in this instance?
Estrogen or hormone replacement, because it's not just about estrogen. It's about all the hormones your ovaries produce. And there's many more beyond estrogen and progesterone. But that's the tool that we're missing. We're not really looking at the loss of our ovaries as a type of disease, because it happens with aging. It's natural, absolutely. But every disease happens with aging. All of it is natural. So, and it's the loss of a vital organ. So unless we look at it as something crucial for our health and treat it properly, we're not really going to move the needle on what actually helps us stay healthy for as long as men do.
So let's go there straight away then. So, what role do women's hormones play in our biological aging? And maybe first, even to
Yeah.
explain for anybody who may not know the difference between chronological age and biological age.
So let's then start from the beginning on there's been this quest to find a way to measure aging that started a long time ago. And my father was one of the pioneers. So he found a way to measure biological age more than 15 years ago now. And there's competing theories. So there's different ways to measure it. And aging probably won't be one thing because it's so complex. But we're trying to find out what's the difference between, somebody who lives to 55 versus somebody who lives to 122, because that's a huge gap in lifespan. And then what are these tools that we can, or biomarkers that we can learn to measure early on to help us reach more of that maximum lifespan? And the one that we've focused on is inflammation, or something called inflammaging, which is this continuous damage to your immune system through life, partially influenced by genetics, so what is your predisposition, partially by environment, or in our case, it's 60% environment, epigenetics, and your immediate environment and behavior for the last 3 months. So everything that...
Yeah, like your lifestyle.
Your lifestyle,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, that's... thank you. So now do we have tools to measure it? And what they are, they're actually predictors of future risk, which could be disease and mortality. But because you can measure it today, you can then prevent those risk factors in the future.
And can I just stop you there? So, inflammaging, am I saying that word right?
Yeah, that's perfect.
I mean,
yeah.
for the longest time, I
Yeah.
actually said inflammaging, and I'm like, that is the ugliest word. And then I was like, oh, actually, it's inflammaging.
Yeah.
Much nicer word. But let's talk about that, because that is interesting, because the signs of, I guess the things that you look for in the body, there are things that is inflammation, right? And there's inflammation that's good and there's inflammation that's bad. Can you just explain to us what inflammaging is?
Sure. So inflammaging is a theory that now we have a lot of proof behind it to say, yes, this is a real driver of decline in health and the risk of mortality with life. It was originally coined by an Italian researcher in 2006. So he's the first who created this theory of inflammaging. And then he had a speculation of all these different biomarkers that we can look at to look at this mechanism. And one of them was the human glycome. And this is our field. And these are these complex sugar molecules that you would have on the majority of your proteins, but also on all of your cells. They would coat your cells, they would coat your lipids, and they basically add function to your biology, which you design. So it's nothing to do with your dietary sugars or carbs in your diet. That's the biggest mistake people have. They think, oh, this is to do with my diet, I'm just going to eat less sugar. It doesn't work this way. These are your sugars that you produce to enable your body, your biology, to communicate on a multi-cell level. So they're steps beyond our genome and epigenome. They're kind of the final fine-tuning we have in biology to give our biology function. And when we look at it on the immune system, we see this decline of the immune system through age. And we're looking at it on the adaptive immune system. So this is always this learning, aging immune system versus the immediate response, which is acute inflammation, which you should have. For example, if you have an infection, if you go to the gym, the next day you're going to be inflamed because your muscles are building themselves. And this is positive inflammation. So you need it there. And of course, it's a survival response. So an acute phase we need it, but if it becomes chronic, then it causes long-term damage and leads to chronic disease.
So let's come back to chronological age is the year you were born and how many years you've been on this earth. And then the biological age, is that a sign of how, I don't know, how hard you've been living, for example?
I think the better way to think of it, because it's changeable. So even if you've been living hard, and also living hard might actually build resilience. So I think that would be the wrong way to look at it. Think of it that your health has a number. And if health aging was the same for everyone, we'll all live to 120 or 100, whatever the maximum lifespan is. But there's things along the way which shorten our lifespan. And this is what we're trying to measure with biological age. So it's more a number that we can add to your health, which actually has nothing to do with the date you were born, because this gap between us is huge. Somebody will only get to 35, and somebody will get to 122. So we're measuring this gap in between.
And what I love what you're saying about it, though, is that it is a number that can change. And it can change based on many things, right? Like diet, lifestyle, supplementation, hormones.
Correct. Actually, one of the bigger impacts we see is with hormones. And that was we had the data even 2016, but we kind of didn't respond to it. It was like, okay, that's interesting. But basically, we see that men and women age completely differently. Actually, women are protected against inflammation prior to menopause, so they age slower. And they also have less disease compared to men prior to menopause. And then around the perimenopause to menopause, they have this rapid acceleration. So we usually see their immune system age about 10 years in the transition to menopause. And that's on average. It can, age a few years, it can age 30 years in some women. And that's probably why women live longer, because they do have this advantage in regulating inflammation, which is probably driven by their hormones. Because even when you think about pregnancy, there's this very special estrogen that we produce in pregnancy, which is super anti-inflammatory, and you're resilient to lots of
amazing.
And that's something which only. But for example, rheumatoid arthritis, which is an inflammatory disease, spontaneously goes into remission during pregnancy because of this special estrogen which is produced. So potentially our biology protects us when we're in a reproductive cycle, and then it starts to work against us after that. So we see that these 10 years that you can gain by going through menopause are completely reversible with hormone replacement therapy.
So do you think that, a lot of people think that menopause is just something that happens to them?
Yeah.
Do you believe that how we experience menopause and how we age is a choice?
Absolutely. There's many different influencers on it. A lot of it just behavioral and lifestyle-based. And then there's many treatment options that have a big impact. So all of these things are a choice.
Yeah, I think, to me, menopause is inevitable, right? Like, it's like Christmas or New Year's. But we always people fail to prepare for it, right? And we can be proactive. We can make choices that shape how we age and how we thrive through this transition. And what I love about what you're doing is that we can track those things over time.
So you're talking about being prepared or knowing what to do. And I think let's start with that and then kind of dissect what happened in the HRT space and then go into solutions and how biomarkers can help. So 20 years ago, or 2000s, about 40% of women were on estrogen. And that was the right direction to go with. And then we had the largest women's health trial ever, the Women's Health Initiative. And they decided to look at hormone replacement because that was the most promising candidate for preventative interventions. And they decided that their primary endpoint, so this is kind of like what's going to make or break the trial, is going to be prevention of cardiovascular disease because that was the biggest killer in women, and that was the target to go after. And they to achieve that target, because it was already a billion-dollar trial, it cost a lot of money, to achieve that within a reasonable time frame, they decided to select women who were already about 10 to 12 years post-menopause, because that had more of a likelihood they're going to meet, they're going to see the hard endpoint, which is somebody having a heart attack or stroke.
Yes.
And because they selected this cohort of women, of course, you had cohorts of younger, but this was the predominant cohort, and there was already lots of obesity, lots of early stage cardiac. Like, it wasn't the ideally designed trial. It didn't meet its primary endpoint after a certain point, and they shut it down early. And then this trial, which was very poorly designed, got data, which ended up being false later on, that HRT causes breast cancer. And that leaked to the press before the paper was published, before it was peer-reviewed, and it just snowballed, this negative PR around hormone replacement therapy. And the usage went from 40% to 4 to 5. And today, still in the US, it's 4 to 5. UK is doing a little bit better. I think it's between 12 and 13% now. And now, because the long-term data came throughout the years, because you have to wait 20, 30, 50 years for outcome on mortality and disease prediction, depending on if a woman goes on estrogen around the age of menopause. So this is back to the timing theory. When do you start? And if it's a preventive therapy, then you have to help support the function of this organ or the loss of this organ when it's happening, not wait 10, 12 years afterwards. So the use of estrogen around the age of menopause reduces all-cause mortality by 40%.
Let's pause there for a second, because I really want to make sure everybody heard that. So over the subsequent 20 years it's been since that study, there have been other studies that have followed as well. And they are showing that women who initiate estrogen therapy early in menopause are seeing a 40% reduction in all-cause mortality. I just want that to sink in for everybody right now. Because as we talk about on the show all the time, as we are losing our estrogen and progesterone and whatnot, that it's impacting the performance of our organs, right? Our heart health, our brain health, our lung health, our everything. So that's a 40% reduction in all-cause mortality, not even related to just cancer.
Exactly. And even saying these are not other trials, this is even that trial. I think there the all-cause mortality reduction was 11 to 15%. I honestly, I think I sent the references, but we need to double check. And there they were introducing it very late around the age of menopause, and it was the cheapest synthetic form of the drug that's not even used today anymore. So even there was a mortality reduction. There was a 26% reduction in diabetes incidence. There was a 4 to 10% reduction in all cancers, depending on if it's just the estrogen arm or the estrogen and progesterone. So the benefits were even in that very poorly designed trial when they went back and they analyzed the data properly. So that's the doing science properly. And what was interesting, that the scandal, which was around breast cancer, increased incidence of breast cancer, there the increased risk was 1.26. And above 1, so it was, let's put it into perspective. So if you smoke, the increased risk of lung cancer is 27.6. So there was 1.26, and the mortality of the cancer was not there.
And listen, I am a child of somebody who went through that generation and have grown up with my mother experimenting with it and then going off of it because 2 of her friends got cancer. So I carry that baggage with me too. And what I'm learning along this journey too is, again, it's very individual, but the conversation around HRT tends to just simply be about symptom relief. End of. But it's a broader and bigger conversation than that. I interviewed a nutritionist the other day on the show, and we were talking about how you metabolize estrogen, making sure that it's not coming, recirculating back in your body, how it's broken down in your body. We're all individual. And just like this is an individual choice for everybody, you have to get information that's relevant for you as well. And I know even Dr. Vonda Wright, she says that estrogen is the elixir of female longevity. And, I think you guys talk about menopause, how it can be a primal force in female longevity. And it's almost like you're really passionate about repositioning HRT as longevity medicine.
Preventive.
And even moving it
Yeah.
out of the whole, just symptom relief conversation, which I think is really interesting because it gets us into conversations around disease prevention and, as everybody's talking now, health span extension. So talk to us a little bit more about that.
Um, okay, so let's end the kind of, and I think you do need a physician to talk about the counterindications for HRT, because there are some, of course. But the majority of women would see benefit. And now having only 5% versus a much greater proportion of women that could benefit from it is the wrong way around. So we should talk about it from the beneficial point, and of course, consider some of the risk factors, but not make them ginormous so that everybody's afraid of it. And their first thinking is no.
Yeah, it's kind of like even just taking a paracetamol or a Nurofen. If you go in the little package instructions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Every piece of medication that anybody takes there are risks with it. I mean, if you eat a whole thing of Pringles, I mean, there even is a risk to eating too many Pringles. There's a health risk. So everything does. But for some reason, this conversation is only talking about the negatives. And you're trying to change that narrative, just like we are here on Menopausitive. But yours distinctly around the role of HRT in helping women with healthy aging.
Correct. And of course, there's benefit in you focusing your health beyond just introducing HRT or thinking about HRT. But it's a crucial component that others, we don't put as positive perspective, and we like the data at the moment of how positive it is. So then let's actually talk a little bit about risk. So the main, so the breast cancer risk was removed from the packaging. That was finally corrected after a long amount of time. But the actual risk is related to clotting. And even hormones are known for that, contraceptive pills, even in pregnancy, you can be at higher risk of clot, and it's quite common. And then the risk of clot could be VTE, could be pulmonary, could be stroke. So it's a real risk to manage. And that's, I think, where we're going to do more work on clinical applications. So the first clinical application we thought will be relevant is detecting menopause early, or while you're still cycling, when has that significant estrogen drop happened? Because with inflammation, we see that when your optimal level of predominantly estrogen, but other hormones as well, when that has dropped, inflammation goes up. It's a very clear signal. And that should be the point where you start to reintroduce your hormones. And what actually happens is you continue to suffer with that for a long period of time, because you can be cycling for 10 years plus, and your hormones have dropped, but you're still cycling. So you have all these symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, but you're not there yet. And the official diagnosis of menopause is a retrospective diagnosis, which means when you haven't cycled for a year. So if you haven't had a cycle for 6 months, but then you have it for 1 month, and then
you start again from zero.
Yes.
You start from zero. Just like you're saying, during perimenopause, though, estrogen does go up and down. I mean, it is a roller coaster. So this is interesting for me, too, because I think so many women are talking about having blood tests. Like, am I in perimenopause? I get it's so funny that there's a test to tell if we're pregnant, but there isn't a test to tell if we're in perimenopause or menopause. And again, some of the work that you're doing with the glycan monitoring, like if you take a blood test at the beginning of your cycle, a blood test at the second half of your cycle, it could be different. And that's why a lot of doctors, and I actually think it's changed here in the UK that they're not even doing blood tests after the age of 45 anymore, because it's you're highly likely you are in menopause. But the amazing thing about the glycan monitoring is that it's stable. It doesn't matter what time of month you are cycling in. So let me just repeat kind of what you were saying about. So again, in the terms of the findings, you were saying that obviously when estrogen drops, inflammation goes up. So during perimenopause, though, that's going up and down and up and down. Okay.
But this would be So when you're cycling normally, we don't see a change within the month, or we see a 1% change, which doesn't really affect the measurement. So it's a very stable measure of systemic chronic inflammation. And then predominantly when estrogen drops, because in perimenopause you could be losing progesterone first. So you might need a bit of a different approach to when you actually need estrogen. And usually that goes one way, because it's not about one cycle. It kind of integrates everything in the last 3 months, and then all the predispositions that happened before that. So it would be over these last couple of months, you have had a significant, and it's a particular glycosylation pattern. So it's not that your whole kind of drivers of inflammaging change. It's this particular one, which is mainly related to hormonal balance, and in this case, actually estrogen. So it kind of shows you a long-term concentration over the last couple of months. And that's the point where an intervention could be beneficial. So we were first thinking, that's going to be the application. Let's find it early, because you have all these symptoms and you go to your GP, and the statistic is most of the time, or you go in, a woman goes in with perimenopause symptoms, and 66% of the time she gets an antidepressant or a sleeping pill or something for the symptom, but nobody talks about potentially her hormones, and there's no test to do. So also women come into their GP frustrated, wanting to do a hormone test to find out where they are. And the problem is that hormones change daily. So and we all have different levels, and the normal range, so the normal reference range on the third day of your cycle is 50 to 350 or 360. So anywhere in between that, you're normal. So if you dropped from the 200s when you were in your mid-30s, 20s, and now you're 100, your doctor will tell you, oh, you're all good. Your hormones are perfectly fine. So that's where inflammation has a really nice signal, because it's more, is your organism in balance, or something called homeostasis. And hormones keep us in this optimal balance. And when they're off, the inflammation goes up.
And it's very personal to you.
It's very personal to you. So it's not to do with the reference range. It's not to do with the daily changes in hormones. It's really your range of... And it's best to, of course, follow through time, because where you land initially is going to change as you go through that transition.
And I love this because you're not an average.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Women walking into these offices like, oh, yeah, you're within range. You're like the general population, but you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that there's a technical component to it, but we're going to avoid it, because that's going to
keep it simple.
Go too
keep
deep
it simple
into
for us today, Nikolina.
So that we thought that point would be most relevant. But then as we were talking to menopause specialists, which would be the first ones to adapt the technology, they were saying, oh, I'm actually pretty good at detecting it. I asked a whole range of symptoms, and if any of them are related, you're going to try, and then we're going to follow on how you respond to the drug based on symptoms. So I think that could be relevant, yes, to even those women, if we can get into general routine screening, because that means everybody gets it. And then also the women who are not symptomatic, but who are still experiencing that because it's related to your long-term health. And you might be a very healthy person. There could be reasons that you're not feeling symptoms, but it doesn't mean that your inflammation is not going up and that you're not increasing your risk because of it. And we think of HRT as a symptom alleviating drug, and we don't think of it as a mortality-reducing preventive health drug. So it could play a role there, but we wanted to work with the current specialists in menopause care. So we were going back and forth trying to find out and we were following these different cohorts of women, and everybody has a different theory on how to prescribe, which hormones, how much. There's no consensus in the field. And then we were following these two cohorts, one in the UK, one in the US. And we said both of them are generally reducing inflammaging and most of the inflammatory markers. But in the UK cohort, actually the cardio risk was going up because we see gender-specific cardio predictors. And we don't yet understand why they're gender-specific. But one assumption is that for women, the cardio events could be more related to clotting, meaning stroke. And that's a space that we want to understand more. But if it is related to the clotting risk and then to the hormonal differences between men and women, then we can detect this kind of clot-specific stroke risk, which does happen with HRT or VTE, pulmonary, basically that side. So we focused in on that. And we saw that there's these two cohorts. The clinic in the US was reducing the cardio risk and all the inflammatory markers together. The clinic in the UK was increasing the cardio risk. And this is very early data, so it's very small. We don't yet know if it's the ultimate truth, because it's a small cohort of women. We need to do thousands to say, yes, actually, there. And we need to wait for somebody to have an event to actually. So these are all kind of surrogate biomarkers where we did very good work on cardiovascular disease. We've looked at hundreds of thousands of people in different cohorts. We did retrospective trials, meaning going to a biobank and following people for 30 years from when they're healthy to when they have a cardio event. And then we did randomized controlled prospective trials with Harvard, where we can see a twofold increased risk of heart attack and stroke, which is independent from all the other cardio risk tools that you have in practice at the moment. So it's a nice new predictor, and it's 8.3 years ahead of an event. So in the cohorts we looked at. So it's very early on before actually something goes wrong. And then I'll just quickly touch the two theories. So the clinic in the US is a little bit more longevity focused. And the doctor likes to also prescribe testosterone. So there's potentially two things which are working towards reducing the cardio risk. One is the lifestyle changes, exercise, diet, or potentially the testosterone, which is added to a therapy, because we lose all of our hormones, including testosterone, not just estrogen and progesterone. And we don't yet have, like in some countries, Australia, I think, you can prescribe testosterone to women, but in most other countries, you have to do it off-label to actually give them the drug. It won't be a standard treatment.
And remind me, the women in both studies in the US and UK, they are on HRT or they are not? They are on HRT.
Yep.
So the US clinic has more of a longevity perspective. So there's lifestyle elements that are being prescribed alongside the HRT that's already there and the testosterone. And then the UK clinic
is just focused on the drug.
Just the HRT.
Yeah, because they want to make it as affordable, as accessible as possible. So the main, you come in, you have a 30-minute consult, you get the treatment. There's there's a little bit of investigation in other areas, but it's predominantly focused on the drug intervention.
But it's got to be good to have the two comparisons, because the ones where you're just being prescribed the HRT is probably the majority of people. Right?
Yes. Keep in mind, this is very early. So we're just trying to figure out what has a clinical use case today, and then what could have a use case in the long run where we can really transform, when menopause is detected, how it's treating, it becomes general standards. So there's the dosing element, and every clinic has a different theory. One will say very low, as short as possible, and then it will say very high.
Yeah, some say low and slow.
Yeah.
And you have to go with, sometimes what the client, the patient wants.
So we can't say that this clinic governs what we'll see in others or what we'll see in standard NHS, because again, it's private menopause care. Most menopause care is unfortunately private. And the goal of these studies is for us to observe the current differences in kind of clinical protocols, and then see if we can, find some interesting signals and then follow those signals. So what we're doing now, we're doing another study with the UK clinic where the cohort also has testosterone. So we're going to see if the free drugs are prescribed, does this move the cardio? And these are very small increases. So I'm very, and this is about the ethical science. It's not published, it's not peer reviewed, we're not there yet. We're exploring a potential use case for it. So what we mainly want to do is find more research partners and build large cohorts and then make a conclusion and introduce something new. But we will find out if it's potentially testosterone, which is kind of mitigating the potential stroke or the clot. It can be VTE. So I think most events are actually VTE, venous thrombosis. They're pretty harmless, and it's not very manageable as well. So I think that risk, what we see as a cardio signature, could actually be VTE.
And I think for everybody listening, though, because I think there's a lot of science in there, like you said, and it's a lot of research, and this is very, very early days, like you said. But to me, what makes this so interesting and why I wanted to talk about it was even in those 2 test studies, you can, through your testing, which I'll get you to explain it later. I mean, it's literally a like a pinprick on your finger, but you're able to monitor the impact of these interventions. And because you are tracking inflammation, those are the biomarkers of of disease, right, or illness. You are catching that early. So back to our conversation about women's fear of HRT, which is still connected to the breast cancer risk or stroke, I guess things like that you were talking about. If you have any fear, if you're nervous in any way, this is an amazing tool to have alongside you and your healthcare provider so that you can track if you're metabolizing your HRT properly, if it's being detoxified properly in your body, or if other things are going on and it's not working for you, you can catch that early.
That's the potential of it. So I have to make a disclaimer. We would never give this information to consumers. It's for clinicians because we still need to fully understand
You've just
it.
given it to all our listeners, though. You know that, right?
Yes, but it won't be in your report. Because we have a consumer version of the product, which doesn't talk about disease risk. And then we have a clinician version of the product, which gives the disease indications.
Yes, of course.
So there's differences.
But that's what I mean. They could have this alongside their healthcare provider.
Correct, yes. For this application, it would really be, and we're trying to increase the amount of private clinics and public clinics that we work with. It will be finding those practitioners which are open-minded to new precision medicine tools, which are applying them, which are willing to learn, before we set a standard. Because setting a standard is a decade-long. Changing the standard is a decade-long plus journey. But putting it into practice can happen now. And that's what we're doing already.
Quick break to tell you about a fab podcast called Say It Sister with my friends Karen and Lucy, 2 women chatting honestly about life, self-discovery, and healing. It's real, it's raw. It feels like tea with your girlfriends. Please go check it out, Say It Sister, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, back to the conversation. And I think, exactly, like today we have the data and the tools to support women. So this can be a complement to working alongside their doctor or their menopause expert. In your research, what are you seeing the difference between women going through perimenopause, postmenopause, without any hormone replacement, and then women that are going through it with hormone replacement?
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference in their biological age? I'm sure it's different for everybody. I won't hold you to the answer, but in general, what's the range that?
Okay, so you have that long-term data, which is from all the different HRT trials, that the reduction in all-cause mortality is 40% with estrogen versus without estrogen, and HRT, the whole cocktail. So when you go on estrogen, especially for tracking healthy women who are going on the drugs, so then we have a lot of healthy women because they're the ones to go into a private clinic. There's the ones who are going to engage with this as consumers. They're much, much younger than the average. And that could be 10, 20, 30 years in immune system function, which is predominantly a combination of the HRT plus the healthy lifestyle probably. And that's because in our cohort, we built this cohort of 300,000 human glycomes of around the world, different ages, longitudinal, cross-sectional. It's a very nice data set. But still, the average woman we have in those cohorts are not on HRT because only 5% of them in the world are. And I think that's what we're seeing. That's why we're seeing their immune system function so much younger, because our cohorts are biased to women who are not on estrogen. But on our biomarker, if you put it into an age, they are 20, 30, of course, sometimes only 5, but they are much, much younger than they're supposed to be. And that just means that their immune system functions at this, they have the level of inflammation of, there might be 60, but they have level of inflammation of a 35-year-old. We can also plot this to certain risk factors, metabolic, cardiovascular, and general reduction in all-cause mortality. So they're in a very good place.
I'm really excited because you're letting me try this. So I'm waiting for the package to arrive to my door. So for the people listening, though, so from a consumer-facing perspective, how does it work?
Oh, it's so for consumers, we have a very nice simplified version of the product. It's a blood test you can do at home. It's a finger prick. It doesn't require too much blood. It's we need 4 sizable drops, and we even run this analysis free. But we analyze every sample 3 times, so this variability is less than 1%. So if you see a 1-year change, it's not a measurement error; it's a biological change. So it's a simple test you can do at home. It comes with a follow-on consultation with our specialist team, who are mainly doctors, clinical nutritionists. They're educated in glycobiology, so they know how to interpret it. And then you get an actionable plan on what to do next, focus on lifestyle interventions. And if you need a referral to practice, or there's an area you should investigate, like perimenopause maybe, or autoimmunity, anything else, we refer you to our practitioners, the private clinics we work with.
But if you do the test and you initiate some of the changes, you could test again. How long would you wait until you had?
Depending on the intervention.
Yeah.
So if it's something a bit more dramatic, so actually with estrogen or HRT, we see change even within 2-3 months. You can see a significant drop, 5-7 years, and some clients even 10.
Wow.
Because it does act, and you can also feel the difference very quickly. So I'll give you an example. I had a board member. She was an investment banker, and she went into menopause early. She's a smoker, so probably some impacts there. And she didn't want to go because of the fear of cancer. She didn't want to go on the drug for 6-7 years. And she could not sleep. She had all kinds of pains and just could not sleep, and had all kinds of funny interventions or something like this that she slept with. And then eventually, I think her doctor gave her HRT a number of times, but she just wouldn't take it. And then 7 years later, she finally tried it. And 2 weeks later, she called me, said, I'm sleeping. She hasn't slept for 7 years. So
I love those stories. I love those stories. And it, yeah, for some people it's the right move. That's why I'm really interested in I personally have made many lifestyle interventions in the lead up to and like through my perimenopause journey. And once you're eating well and you've got an exercise routine and you have stress management, like you're sleeping well, these things can help you. I am really interested in the role of estrogen, but hormones for health span, like to, whether you can prevent Alzheimer's, dementia, my heart health, just overall. And that's what I'm really, really fascinated in. And that's why I really love this conversation. So even if women, the first instance, if it was just lifestyle interventions, then you can track that. And then
yes.
if they do then go on that's an interesting journey to go on. I mean, that would be so
Yeah.
fun. I'm such a geek. I mean, I'd find that so fascinating to see that. Are you hoping that more doctors and menopause providers like use the tool kind of to show the systemic benefits? Because I think again,
Yeah.
I think sometimes HRT, people think it's like a crapshoot, right? Like, okay, here we're going to give this to you. We're going to cross our fingers and we're going to hope it's going to work. But alongside the glycan monitoring, it could really be a tool for doctors to show their patients, like, look, and we can also track if something nasty is going to happen.
You were asking about how long it takes after lifestyle intervention. So if you're going to do a diet and exercise change, wait a little bit longer, 4 to 6 months, and then you can see the impact. If you're gonna fast for a week, meaning a 3 to 5 day water fast, drinking just water, we see impacts even within a couple of weeks, and they're quite dramatic. So it depends on how dramatic is the intervention. If you do something which is a stressor, like exercise, and overdo it, we can then also detect the negative side of that.
Yeah, like if you ran a marathon
exercise
or something, you're bodybuilding or something.
Correct. So if it's lifestyle, usually wait a little bit more. And then if it's something dramatic or a nutraceutical or a drug intervention, then it can be much, much quicker.
I kind of felt like I just wanted to give this to everybody for Christmas. What would you say to a woman listening right now who feels powerless about aging and menopause?
There's nothing to feel bad about with aging, because I think we give an excuse to lots of symptoms as if they're aging related, which means that, oh, we won't be able to change, they're inevitable. And we can excuse lots of symptoms under the aging label. I mean, I had a horrible lifestyle 10 years ago at 25, and I was constantly tired. I had all kinds of gut-related, autoimmune-related symptoms, and I felt horrible. And I feel better now at 35. So I could excuse some of these things, even at 25, as aging. I felt some of these things are relate to aging. I'm 25. And actually they would just relate to my lifestyle and my health and my stress load. So I think this excuse of something being aging is the wrong way to approach it, and also makes it unchangeable. So now if we reframe aging as something that's changeable, all of a sudden, you can get over whatever the symptom is. And you can, I know 65-year-olds who said they've never felt better in their life.
I think everything is modifiable regardless of your age, right? The way you eat, you can modify it. The way you move, you can modify it. You can find help for your sleep. And it doesn't matter how old you are.
There's solutions to all of the symptoms, and there's 100 different approaches.
What is the one thing you wish every woman knew about staying biologically younger longer?
Every woman.
What do you wish everybody
Doesn't
knew?
matter which age group. Ooh.
Or you could pick if you want.
So I think this is so personalized that there's no general advice, and I think that's the
Maybe that's the answer.
That's the catch. So I would say that stress is an impact for everyone, but if I think your listeners are potentially you have to tell me actually, so I won't go into it. But let's say if their stress load is high, which is most people, that's the number one thing to manage when you're young, because that's what we see accelerates inflammaging. It's this being stuck in fight or flight. And today we're stuck in fight or flight because we're late to podcast.
She wasn't. No. She was really on time. The final question that we ask all of our guests. Knowing what we know now about inflammaging and the menopause, what would you tell our 35-year-old listener?
So for a 35-year-old, I would again say stress. If we see this really high load of inflammaging in young people, usually leads to something autoimmune. So I would watch for the stress load.
What would you tell our 45-year-old listener?
45 could probably already is perimenopause, not for everyone, not for the lady who stopped cycling at 60.
It's like a unicorn.
Yeah, there's actually quite a few.
I think my mom actually was quite late as well.
Yeah. So that's the time to think about preparing for it. And that's, of course, with lifestyle to start with. And then also considering when to start therapy, hormone replacement, and not to be afraid of it, and not to excuse the symptoms for so long. I think women are so willing to suffer. They're like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna, until it becomes severe enough that I have to do something. So being proactive about it, educating yourself about the topic, making a decision on if you're gonna try, when, and then following that journey.
It is one of the biggest decisions I think women in this generation right now anyway is making around HRT, but just to get informed and ask the right questions based on your unique biology. And what would you tell our 55-year-old listener?
Again, very hard to generalize, but the biggest killer of women is cardiovascular disease. And we're afraid of other things way more than we are of a cardio event. That's the thing to start monitoring for, to do early interventions. Your family would love to have you around for a long time. Be proactive about it.
Nikolina, thank you so much for being part of the Menopausitive community. Now, if people were interested in learning more about GlycanAge and the testing, how can they find you?
They can go on our website, glycanage.com. We have a section for consumers, so all the curious listeners and physicians as well. And if they're doctors, they can sign up for our platform, and then they can also enroll in some of the studies we have around menopause.
And you're definitely making the tour of all the health summits and longevity summits. And she was rushing here from another conference, so she's a very busy lady. Thank you very much for being here and sharing kind of the impact of how we manage our menopause can influence the trajectory of our aging. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. It was lovely.
Now, I bake for all of my guests.
Oh,
Nikolina.
okay.
And I know you're a very busy lady, but so today I actually made you a raspberry chia jam.
Oh my God.
You can have it on yogurt. You can have it on your toast. It's just with maple syrup.
Oh, it's lovely.
A little something for you to take home with you.
It's so sweet.
Homemade. I hope you enjoy
It's
it.
lovely. No, my mom makes jam, and this is wonderful. I'll enjoy
what kind
it
of
very
jam
much.
does she make?
Anything that's in the garden.
She has
Plum, strawberries, cherries,
Plum
whatever's in
jam
the...
is my
yeah.
favorite. My mom makes a mean
Yeah.
plum jam as well. I just love a homemade jam. It just is like a hug in a jar.
No, it's lovely, and I love croissants, so it goes well.
Oh, very good. You can eat some of those when you're here. Oh, and by the way, I knew you were menopausitive when you downloaded this episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love bringing this information to you, and I love that you're taking control of your health. You can follow Menopausitive on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast. Join me next week as we discover more ways to optimize our bodies. Because together, we're going to redefine menopause.
I got a good feeling.